This is the first of 5 provost forums on the campus climate that'll be happening across the spring. As I'm sure many of you know, Provost Quick called for this series of forums in the fall, following the passage by the student government of the resolution on campus climate. But I think even more importantly, following on the ongoing activist work of a great number of you on campus to continue to kind of apply pressure to address issues on campus related to racism, sexism, and a variety of other problems that confront the USC community in our world. So we're going to jump in and we're going to start the conversation. We're going to begin with Provost Quick.
I don't want our conversations to simply be about creating a climate of compliance. That's absolutely necessary. If there are sexual assaults going on this campus, then we need to root out the problem. We need to make sure that people who commit those kinds of crimes are prosecuted. We must do that. For incidents of racial bias that happen on this campus, we have to have the pieces in place to make sure that we look into those issues and prosecute them as necessary. So a culture of compliance is absolutely necessary for what we want to achieve at this university, but it is not enough. We need to figure out how are we going to create an environment that allows our students, our faculty, our staff to achieve what they want to achieve while at this university. These are the issues I think that are incredibly important. If this university wants to be the kind of university that I think we all want it to be. And so let's start that, let's get on it, let's work toward creating the kind of university that you guys all deserve.
History is not usually a march towards progress. There's advances and there's steps back. That's always part of the history. It's not just always getting better, right? And I know that the last period under Provost Garrett was step backs. You know, there's a lot of things we lost in terms of race over the last 4 or 5 years. And so the first action step for tonight, I'm going to start a research group on race and USC, which will be an undergraduate research group. Any undergraduates want to do more of this history, I welcome them. We'll kind of do stuff, you know, let's do it. Most of the great information here is in presidential archives, which USC has, but none of them are open to researchers. None of them. I'd like to have them open, right? I don't care whatever time limit you want to have, if it's 50 years, 70 years like the federal government, that's okay, but at some point they got to be open. Transparency is key to how we move forward. It's key to building history. It's key to the academic Senate resolutions. And I want to push on the issue of transparency. A lot of people will talk about accountability. I think that's incredibly important as we move forward on a lot of issues, but we can't have accountability if we don't have transparency, right? If we don't know how many black faculty are currently at USC, how do we know if we've improved in the year? We have to have the numbers. They have to be out. We have to ask ourselves, did we hire more people this year?
I guess the first part is that something that I feel that we're all kind of gesturing toward in this dialogue, but not quite reaching, is specificity and what we're talking about when we talk about climate, what counts and what factors into climate, and what we mean when we talk about diversity. So many of us are here are committed to questions of social justice, organizing around racism, sexism, trans misogyny, all of these kinds of things. But I'm not sure if we're seeing that translated or heard coming from the provost's office, specifically in terms of the language in the memos and I guess the rhetoric around diversity. So I guess my first question is for clarification and whether our demands for diversity are being heard and reflected back to us. Second of all, my question really is one about labor. I think as so many of us here also are organizers and students of color at that, there's no denying that often the labor of organizing around diversity falls on students and faculties of color. And I think that if USC is not addressing that question of labor, time, energy, emotional energy, it's also not dismantling the structure of racism, which is that organizing falls upon people of color. So I guess I'm wondering what structural ways USC can address that question.
for me, it's really clear that USC can only be a stronger 21st century university with greater diversity on staff, faculty levels, and students, right? And right now, we're just not there in terms, certainly in terms of faculty, and I'll maybe talk about that. I'm in Dornsife College. I know we have about 480, 490 tenure track faculty. I know there's 14 Latinos and 16 African Americans and 2 Native Americans. Right, so I know those numbers. That's my job, right? It's not enough. It's just not enough to serve fully the students that we have, the issues of diversity. In these times in which there's greater demands, you're absolutely right that a lot of this does fall on faculty of color, right? So there is a way in which this can change if it's very proactive. The problem is, it's hard to change a culture. And as you know, most of the hiring is done at the very local level, at the departmental level, right, and in the school level. So the real question is, when will the people at the department level and in the school level feel the pressure that you're expressing, but it's being expressed nationally and internationally, to really move forward, right? When will it not be the usual processes? And how can the provost office or the president's office or a schools dean move us towards beyond business as usual and towards a greater attention to the kind of expansion that needs to happen, not just on moral grounds, but also on the grounds of serving in a better way the students and the community that we have, right? There's plenty of, not plenty, there's some non-faculty of color who also do work in this area, right? And one of the things that I think is important is to recognize that work by both faculty of color and faculty who are not of color, or white faculty, right? To kind of recognize when the work is done at the local level. So people who work in these areas have to be willing to have their own programs examined and see, are we spending the money the right way so we actually get progress? That's a tough thing, by the way, because we got a lot of things happening in the neighborhood, in the community. We got a lot of things for undergraduates. We have to make sure that we have assessment of those things, that they're fulfilling the goals that they were intended to, and we're not just reproducing them because we've always done it that way.
One of the questions too that should be addressed is, how do we reincorporate alumni? Because, you know, if we're really gonna be about this transparency, one of the things that I wanted to project forward is it really starts with us. So we have agency now because we've been out in the working world and we've seen how we navigate these same spaces within the outside realm. How do we reincorporate the best of the best? How do we bring them back and make this issue something that continues throughout our church and family, so we set that precedent and it becomes a part of the tradition that we're trying to create, rather than, you know, make it all just student advocacy and then when we graduate, it's over.
And I've noticed that as things have swept across the country on what is being called campus climate, racial, gender, sexual orientation, other marginalized groups, that on a number of campuses, the president has made a dedicated, focused, forward-looking statement. The Vassar and Yale are two schools that come to mind immediately. They aren't the only ones that this has happened. What would it take, Provost Quick, since you have the honor of the title reporting to him, to get him to speak out and speak up and just say, this is important to me because it's important to you, and then kind of give a momentum to it.
No, thank you for that. And you know, I can't speak for the president. What I can speak for is the university, and the university from the highest levels shares that view.
Why can't he say, I share that view? Why
isn't he here?
Why can't he speak in his own voice?
I can't speak for the president.
I mean, I think that is something we might add to a list of outcomes that the university community would like to hear from the president in regards to these issues. I'm writing a list, right? That's on the list.
And I'm just wondering, moving forward, because we've talked so much about we need action steps, we need a plan. I was very, very proud of the clauses that were in the resolution. I felt that they were they would be very, very instrumental in moving forward. And now knowing that those are in need of adjustment, I was wondering if you would be willing to provide explicit context as far as which clauses will not work and how we need to readjust them so that we can actually have an action step now with this advisory board so that we can know what needs to be changed and let it be changed and we have an action step moving forward.
Great, thank you. And, that was my hope that as we move forward with the task force, that'd be one of the things that we would work on is having a dialogue about a response to each of the pieces of the resolution, what we felt would work, what we might have to adjust, what might be a little bit different in each school as they were to roll it out, and so we'll certainly do that.
Okay, just one more. Go.
In terms of diversity, I think it also, in my mind, extends to our presence outside of these walls that we kind of live in every day at USC. There's animosity festering below the surface, and a lot of that comes from our only interactions with them or knowledge of them are negative things. And so it's amazing to me that we've been here for decades. I'm second semester at film school, by the way, but I feel like we've been here for all this time. But I hear whispers of different programs that are happening. I guess what you mentioned earlier about USC maybe trying to reach out, but I think it also is a factor of educating the students here about the university, about the community outside this university, which I've heard nothing about since I got here. The community is not composed of kids, young dudes who growing up one day I'm gonna go to USC. They look at USC these people they don't care about us, they don't know nothing about us, they don't, they look at us and they full of fear because the first thing you hear when you get here is be wary of the locals, you know what I mean? Watch out for the locals.
Thank you. I'm glad you waved over there. We'll create a document centrally shared that posts the outcomes from these meetings that we articulate in the close of each forum, so that those will be publicly available to the community and we could check in on them in a year.